I went from being under somebody else's control to being under the control of my own schedule. So I was no longer free to make decisions because I had submitted myself to this crazy schedule, doing too much, taking on way too much work, not saying no to anything. In order to be available for the things that are important to me, I have to learn to say no.
I'm very passionate about intentional living, passionate about goal setting, passionate about stretching myself, but it leads me to this point of maybe having too much faith in my ability to control things. And what I hear God saying to me is that he is willing to wrestle those things away from me so that he can have my confidence in him, not in my planning and my ability to control the outcomes of things.
Welcome back to the Next Peak Podcast. I am your co-host, Clint Herndon. You've tuned into the podcast where we help you redefine success and achieve goals that are actually important to you based on research and real-life stories. Today, I am joined by my friend and co-host, Dr. Parker Houston, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. Have you ever noticed when you go hiking, backpacking, I should say camping or backpacking, one of the best parts of that is sitting around the campfire and just telling stories and just kind of catching up on life and hearing about each other's, successes and things they're working through. And that's kind of what we're going to do today. We don't have a set agenda. We're going to do something we like to call the Campfire. This will be the first time we've done this. And we're just going to kind of kick it off with a few different things. But before I do that, welcome to the podcast, Dr. Parker Houston.
Hey. So our listeners should know too that I'm like Mr. Structure and you're Mr. Organic. Those could be our hosting names. And so many of our episodes you guys might know are like very highly structured, and Clint appreciates that about me. And he also says, "Hey dude, you need to become more organic and we need more of a conversational style." So although this makes me a little bit nervous, we're doing it.
And we're going to have fun.
Yeah, and we're going to have fun around the campfire.
I brought you over to the dark side of the organic podcasting world.
The unstructured organic. So yeah, I've realized a lot of organic food doesn't taste as good as engineered.
I think if you live on
always gristly.
If you live on engineered food, that's probably true. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about two things today, right? Like we're going to talk about what we've been doing to unplug and recharge this summer and what we've noticed, the benefits of that. And then we're going to talk about something important in our life journey that we're learning currently. So you just got back from vacation how many days ago? A couple days ago?
Just 3 or 4 days ago.
Where'd you go? How long were you gone? What happened?
We went to Maui. Took the family. It was an incredible trip. We were gone for about 10 days. And it was us and cousins and aunts and uncles and, grandparents and all that stuff. It was a big group of people and really just kind of decompressed. I mean, my big thing, and maybe I'll talk about this afterwards when we talk about kind of what's going on, but I really wanted to be intentional with my family time. That was the biggest thing I wanted. Tax season, for those of you just tuning in, if you've never heard the podcast, I own a CPA or an accounting tax practice. And in this tax season, the last 2 tax seasons actually have just been crazy because of all the COVID stuff and the craziness going on there and the different changes in the tax laws. And so I really hadn't taken much of a total mental break in 2 years. And I intentionally did not check my email once while I was gone. Not once.
As a business owner, that's got to be
hire
tough.
the right people is what I would say to that. Hire the right people.
Wow. Amen.
Megan, my office manager, did an incredible job of sheltering me from disruption. And I came back to a very orderly office and it's been great. But yeah, no, I was unplugged. I mean, I did some cool stuff. I mean, when I go on vacation, I always like to do something new and something that scares me a little bit. And I have a fear of heights. I always have. And so my family wanted to go zip lining. And I can tell you that was pretty far down my list of things I wanted to do in Hawaii. but it ran into the crosshairs there of I need to spend time with my family and I need to do something that scares me. So I did both.
Wow.
Yeah, it was incredible. After the first tower was really funny. I'm standing up there and I think I was maybe the fifth person to go. I don't know. And my family's looking at me and they're like, "You're terrified." I'm standing there like shaking and my voice is kind of cracking and not something that you would normally see from me. And I got that first one out of my system and then I loved it. And I was like leaning back and, twirling around on the cord while I was going down. It was a good time.
I would have loved to have been there to see you shaking on that first platform sadistically. Yeah, I don't know what that says about me. I want to go back to something you said. You said you want to create memories with your family. So what's important about creating memories with your family?
Being present is the biggest thing. I mean, it's one thing to look back at a picture and say, "Oh, wow, yeah, that was cool." But if you don't really remember the event, you missed out. The picture doesn't tell the story. And so we had some really cool experiences. I took my stepson fishing. He caught a monster fish off the bottom of the ocean, which was really cool. Cool story about that. It was like a sci-fi, or not sci-fi, but kind of a horror movie type situation. He's reeling this thing in from 220 feet deep. We were bottom fishing out by Lanai, actually. We were quite a ways out. And he gets this huge fish on. We can see his pole kind of bending, doing all that. And so he's getting excited, but he stayed super calm. He's reeling this thing in. And as it starts to come out of the deep, we see something else following it up out of the deep, which happens to be a shark. And so the whole boat's screaming, "Oh my gosh, there's a shark coming, a shark, reel it in fast." And so the shark comes all the way to the surface and is following the fish as he's reeling it up. And thankfully they netted the fish before the shark got to it. But that was a really cool experience and, something we were kind of laughing about. And it was fun to watch him tell the story to the cousins and everybody when he got back.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, I to answer your question, it's being present. I think me tuning out from my business was probably the best thing I possibly could have done.
What is it about who you want to be that makes being present so important?
Ooh, that's a tough question. Didn't know you were going to hit me with some coaching psychology questions here.
You told me to be organic. Here it is.
I did. I'm going to regret that, aren't I? The most important things to me are, my faith, my family, and giving back to the community. And so in this instance, I want my family to feel important, and they did not feel important during tax season. And I know that. I saw it in their faces. We've had discussions afterwards, and unfortunately there wasn't much I could do during tax season. I'm making plans so that doesn't happen again next year. But so this vacation was really, really important to just say, man, you guys are important to me. Like, I'm going to do things. I want to see you guys happy and enjoying this vacation. That's going to make me happy. So they kept asking me, "What do you want to do when you're here? What do you want to do?" And I said, it doesn't matter. Like, you guys set the agenda. What's going to make you guys happy? Because that's where I'm ultimately going to find the most joy. So yeah, it was cool. Wow. And to be honest, it was probably one of the better vacations we've ever gone on as a family.
Wow, it's funny. It makes me think about how I've approached vacations in the past, where there have been times where I planned out every single day and an activity every single day to kind of try to squeeze the most out of the vacation. But then you end up being such a slave to the timeline and the activities that it takes away from the enjoyment. But I'll talk more about my life lessons in my section. So what happened on the last day of your vacation?
So the first half of the vacation was all with the bigger family, extended family. We were kind of at a very fancy resort condo. And then the last 3 nights, it was just the 4 of us, and we were in a smaller condo, but it overlooked the ocean. It was a very modest condo, but it had an absolutely gorgeous view. We were probably, 30 feet from the where the ocean broke against the wall. And I was just sitting out there on the back patio, and it dawned on me that I was just staring into space. I was just watching the waves and listening to the birds, and there was not a thought or a curiosity or anything going on in my brain at all. It was just absorbing the environment around me, which almost never happens for me. I'm always thinking. And so that was kind of like this pinnacle moment where I went, oh my gosh, like I finally got relaxed. I don't have to worry about anything. This is cool. This is what people talk about.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how long were you guys gone again?
10 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I think it took that long because I don't take breaks normally. Like I don't find those empty spots very often. And I think that was kind of a lesson that I need to make that happen more often. It shouldn't take 10 days to get your head clear. So, yeah.
Do you have a favorite moment of when you were on vacation, like the highlight for you?
Yeah, I mean, the day we went ziplining was incredible. So my couple things happened, obviously the overcoming the fear of heights thing, which is funny because I've done all kinds of things at high spots, and I don't know why that's still a fear, but it is, including rappelling out of a tower and all that stuff that I did when I was in SWAT. But that whole day was just cool. We went ziplining in the morning. We walked around a town called Paia, which is a cool little town on Maui. And we went to we went to a little sandwich shop and stuff. But one of the cool experiences was my stepdaughter reads a ton, and she has this one favorite author. And we're walking through town, and she said, I think that's my favorite author's husband back there. Because I guess she follows both of them on Instagram, and she recognized the husband.
Wow.
And so she, put on her boldness and her courage and walked up and asked him, are you this gal's husband? And he's like, yeah, I sure am. And so he ends up introducing her to her favorite author, and she was just giddy. She was super excited to talk to this lady and get a picture with her. And that totally made her whole world right there. It was really cool to watch. And then later that day, we went for a hike out in a bamboo forest and went swimming under some waterfalls. I mean, it was like this like perfect family day that I think all four of us needed. Like there were just highlights for all of us on that experience.
Wow.
So.
Well, it's cool to hear because I know that raising teenagers is not always easy, and you're in a blended family too. So you're the stepdad, and so it sounds like there were some healing moments there for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you talked about, or what you said, that sometimes we plan an agenda, and sometimes I can be guilty of that too, where I want to maximize the experience and all that stuff. And I think the downtime is actually where most of those moments were created. I think it was, walking around Paia, we weren't doing anything. We were just looking in shops and getting ice cream and hanging out. And that's when she ran into her author. But if we had been on a timeline, it was like, we got to get in the car, we got to do this, we got to do that. We might have missed out on that experience. So it was cool.
Yeah, what I get from what you're saying too is that it's not just about taking a vacation. It's about how you go about taking the vacation that can have an effect on the mental benefits and your family.
Yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit. One of the things that struck me while I was on vacation was that when I go out, so I tend to eat very healthy and I exercise probably, 5-6 days a week for the most part. But when I go on vacation, like the wheels come off and I eat like crud and I don't exercise the entire time. And I usually drink more than I normally drink. And this vacation was not any
Lots
different.
Of water while you're in Maui.
Yeah. Lots of water. Exactly. Yeah. Water mixed with fruity beverages and hard alcohol.
Lots of longboard lager.
Yeah, exactly. But one thing that hit me about halfway through is, we go on vacation to get refreshed, right? That's at least what we tell ourselves why we're doing it. And yet, I'm trashing my body, putting stuff in it that I don't normally put it on at high volumes. I wouldn't say I wasn't getting drunk or anything like that, but I almost never drink, and I was doing at least 2 drinks a day. And then I had to have dessert at least twice a day, and, eating just food that I would just never, ever consume on a regular basis. And so, about halfway through, I'm going like, why am I doing this to myself? I'm not going to come back refreshed. If my head's going to hurt, my stomach's going to hurt. I'm probably going to put on 5 pounds before I get home. Like, that's not refreshing to me. And so the second half of the trip, I kind of changed that up and I came back just totally feeling great. So, yeah.
Well, you look great.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that. I did decide.
You do look, and I truly mean that you look refreshed. You're smiling more. I did a few podcasts with you during tax season. And I don't know if you've ever seen The Walking Dead on AMC, but you could have been a cast member. No offense.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Thank you. So tell me about your plans, my friend. You're getting geared up for vacation, but you just also got back from a couple great trips to Yosemite, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so I'll kick this off by saying too that part of the reason we're talking about this today is we want to encourage people, let them know we're trying to model. It can be a struggle to put these things into practice that we talk about on our podcast, and it's funny how sometimes you'll say, "Oh my gosh, now that we're talking about this, I realize I'm not doing this or something," and I have the same realization. So talking about it is a great reminder to put it back into practice. So, yeah, we've taken a couple little vacations, just some family camping trips and lots of paddleboarding. Like we've been really enjoying paddleboarding as a family, like when we camp at some of the awesome lakes and rivers around here in Northern California. But I got to, we went to Yosemite last summer together on a men's backpacking trip that was just awesome. And so every summer, I've been backpacking every summer for, 25 years or so now. And yeah, I got away to a couple really, really incredible trips with some good friends in the Yosemite wilderness. We went up near Half Dome, kind of in that area in Lake Merced, if people know where that is. Got to see some awesome waterfalls at peak flow. Spent 4 days out there with one of my good friends, Adrian, who I just love and adore. And then last week I went to Vogelsang in Yosemite for 4 days also, and spent a couple of days just walking around in the woods. And what I love about backpacking, it's probably my favorite thing to do. I do love scuba diving and snowboarding, but backpacking might be my favorite because it's a little bit more relaxing. The biggest benefit I get from backpacking is just there's no agenda in the day other than putting one foot in front of the other. And so it's exactly what you're talking about, where I can shut my brain off. I'm somebody that is probably why I became a psychologist. I'm constantly in my head. I'm constantly thinking and probably overanalyzing just about everything. And so it's really nice to be able to shut my brain off and just look at the river, smell the pine trees, feel the wind on my face and the sunshine, kind of look at the wildlife. Yeah, it was awesome. The first night last week that we camped, we didn't really see any other people. We hiked way off trail. We actually crossed a river. We had to put on our creek crossing shoes and crossed a river, and then walked a little ways on the other side of the river and set up our camp. And it was just fantastic. Perfect weather the whole time. Took some icy swims in the rivers and the lakes there, and spent lots of good time, 4 hours in the evening, just talking and sitting by the campfire. It was great.
Oh, that's
really
cool.
Awesome.
You were actually able to have a campfire, huh?
Below 9,600 feet in Yosemite, just so everyone knows I'm following the rules. You can have one. And then we camped higher and didn't have one during part of the trip.
Awesome, man. Any wildlife that you saw while you were out there?
Yeah, we didn't see any bears on either trip. There were lots of bears around, but I haven't seen a bear in a while. And I had a really bad bear encounter the time before that we were in this area. I saw a bald eagle. There were a bunch of deer. There was a group of deer, including some bucks, that were in our campsite for maybe 6 hours. Never had this before, where they just basically stayed right where we were in this meadow, like the entire time that we were there. So it was just awesome. The whole time we were swimming, they stayed just on the other bank of the river. So it was it's funny. I'm feeling more relaxed just thinking about it and talking about it.
I'm feeling relaxed hearing about it.
Oh, yeah. I love backpacking because it hits a lot of my core values. I love deep conversations with friends. So getting time with friends, connecting with God, and for my faith, just having the brain space to pray as I walk, kind of do like a walking meditation thing. So I can pray and listen and tune into what God's trying to tell me, just the brain space. And I like the physical exertion of it too. I love the sensation of carrying absolutely everything you need to survive on your back for several days. It's it's really an awesome feeling. So backpacking is just one of my favorite things ever.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I've enjoyed going with you guys. I'm obviously a novice, but I've learned a couple things from you on those backpacking trips. One is to buy light gear, which you had been telling me. And I was making fun of you because you were buying all this super expensive, like, half ounce gear. And I'm like, wow, what do I need that? This thing's $15 and, it only weighs 15 ounces or whatever. And pretty soon my bag weighed, I don't know, 45 pounds or something. And you guys are walking around with like 25. So I learned that there's value in that expensive light gear. And then the other thing I learned was that I need to add like 3 or 4 miles to every mileage estimate that you give me. So you always tell me that we're only going like
just right up there,
6 miles or so, and it ends up being a grueling one, but it's always a good time. When you got back from that trip, I mean, what was kind of like the big takeaway from the most recent one?
Well, I think that probably ties into what I'm learning right now. I'm a huge goal setter. So I think it's just importance of not having goals and I'm realizing what a perfectionist I am. And I'll say something really stupid example that's going to embarrass me. Even just finding the right campsite, it's like I want to find exactly the best place along the river to camp. And I could look for it for several hours. Whereas my friend Ryan that I went with, he's an air traffic controller who's got to make really quick decisions. So he has absolutely no tolerance for my in-depth analysis of stuff. Hopefully he doesn't, well, maybe he'll listen to this episode. I don't know, but it's rubbed off on me because it's like, we may not camp in the absolute perfect place, and that will be a much better experience than spending 6 hours looking for the right place to put my tent down.
And I'm somewhere in the middle of you two. I like sitting and watching you look for the perfect space while I'm relaxing and you're looking for the best space.
Well, I'm tearing my hair out trying to find the perfect tentable ground and real estate and view and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny.
So let's switch back to you and you're going to talk about an important life lesson that you are learning right now.
Yeah, kind of the hot topic. I would say topics, maybe they're a little intertwined, is something that my friend Alex Judd challenged me on when we were recording a podcast episode a few weeks ago. And he and I have dialogued about it quite a bit. Is this idea that freedom is a learned skill, and that coincides with intentional living. So kind of what you're talking about, like it's a combination. I'm learning that intentional living is absolutely important, but it can also become consuming. But the piece that I'm learning about intentional living is this idea of intent versus want. Because a lot of times we'll say, I want this. I want to be in great shape. I want to be a good father. I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good business leader, but we don't do anything with that, right? Let's take physical health, for example. I want to be in great shape. I want to run, a marathon. Those all sound like great ideas until you actually have to do them. And versus being intentional, I intend to run a marathon. I intend to be in great shape. Then out of that, I'm going to take action, right? I'm intending, there's purpose behind it. So I'm not going to eat the extra helping of, macaroni and cheese. I'm not going to skip my workouts because I intend to do these things, or I've even put them on the calendar to make sure that there's intent and purpose behind them. And I talked about that a little bit when I was talking about my vacation. I've said before that I want to be a great stepdad and I want to be a great husband, but those are wants. And so I needed some intent and some intentional action behind that. And so on this trip, that was really dissecting how can I take it from a want to an intent or into an action. And so that's where I really got off my lazy butt. And every time my family wanted to do something, I jumped in and did it. And sometimes I would have just like stared at the ocean and sat there by myself and missed out. But I intended to be involved with my family, intended to have that dedicated time with them. So, and the reward was definitely there because of that. So that's probably the big topic, but the freedom is a learned skill is also kind of with that as well. And that,
yeah, you were saying that freedom as a learned skill is a big thing that you've tried to apply to your life as a business owner. And so I'm very curious about what you've discovered there.
Yeah, that was God's timing is always perfect. And it feels like this was something that was kind of coming to the surface anyway. And then Alex just did a great job of putting a name to it. And so if you think about it like this, if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner, you probably got tired of working for people and you thought you had this great idea and I'm going to go start this and I'm going to have this great work-life balance and I can dictate my schedule and do all those things. And I did all of that. And the first year and a half of my business, I probably subscribed really well to that. I would, take time off. I'd go golfing. I'd go hang out with friends. I'd work out. I'd hang out with my family. And then the last probably year and a half, I went from being under somebody else's control to being under the control of my own schedule and my own tasks and my clients. So I was no longer free to make decisions because I had submitted myself to this crazy, crazy schedule with doing too much, taking on way too much work, not saying no to anything, being way too available to my clients. Not that my clients aren't important. If any of them are listening, you guys know that I do value you and you are very important to me, but I was doing it to the detriment of my health and even my family, to make sure I was always returning phone calls within 24 hours and make sure I was always available if somebody needed a question answered. And so it's learning that, hey, in order to be available for the things that are important to me, I have to learn to say no, and I have to find that freedom to live my life on the values that are really important to me.
What would be the first step that people should take if let's say somebody's listening to this and they're like, hey, I'm a business owner and I'm doing all those things. What would be the first thing you'd recommend to them?
Assuming you've already identified your personal core values and things like that, I'd say your schedule is probably number one. I think the block scheduling worked really well for me when I was instituting it. It's an idea that a lot of people talk about, but I've heard Michael Hyatt teach a lot on it. And it's this idea of planning out your day and really, things like email. Instead of doing email all day long, you have designated times that you do email or return phone calls, instead of like this constant, reactionary type day where every time an email comes in, you've got to respond to it. And then you get no work done. So I'd say scheduling is the biggest thing, and then honoring that schedule. So if you build a schedule and you say, I'm leaving, I'm going home at 5:00 every night, then you know what? Unless somebody's dying in your lobby, you're leaving at 5:00 and going home. And those are the things that I'm
unless you're an ER doctor.
Right. Exactly.
Then you may need to go home, and even if someone's dying in your lobby.
Exactly. Yeah, it could be different. But as a CPA, they're I hate to say this because I know the IRS can be scary and franchise tax board can be scary, but these are not life and death situations. And most of the time we can remedy it, even if it's past some deadline. So I'm learning to say no to stuff. I'm learning to have better, clearer boundaries and getting back to that schedule.
No clients of yours have had heart attacks in your lobby?
No.
Not yet.
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, I've had a few that I thought one was going to, actually. I told him he had a large tax bill and he kind of got that stunned look on his face. And I went, oh no, man, my CPR card is expired. Don't do this in my office. And that's kind of what I'm learning right now. Freedom is a learned skill, and this
I love that
idea of intentional living. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that phrasing. And I think it's extremely valuable because I'm sure that a lot of people feel like they started their business for freedom and then it's probably running away. Feels like it's often running without them and they've lost control over their schedule and their time.
And it's easy to convince yourself that you can't, that I have to do this. Yeah. I have to. Like, during tax season, I could have said no later on and probably cost myself my business, but I should have said no at the beginning and not taken on so much work. Once I said yes to everything, I had to get it done, right? Yeah. I'm a responsible person, but I could have said no to a lot of things at the beginning. And that's the piece where I'm starting to pay attention. The other thing that I'm doing out of that is hiring. I'm hoping to have probably 3 new team members by the end of the year. And yes, if you're a business owner, you can do the math on that. That is going to cost me money out of my own pocket. But you know what? it's worth every penny of it if I'm not here 80 hours a week, missing time with my family and missing out on my workouts and being stuck to my desk for 80 hours a week. I will gladly give up the amount of money it will cost to get those people in my door.
It's been great to watch you put your values into practice too, and also watch you struggle with it and fight against it and be purposeful about it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. You know, one of the realities I tell people as a business owner, because people want to be very altruistic, which I think we all are, right? Like I have a purpose. I love serving my clients. I love watching them succeed. But the bottom line is we go into business to make money, right? Whether you're an artist, whether you're, if you're going to sell your art, you're selling it, right? You're getting money. Making money is very addictive. And that is a hard thing to break out of the cycle of. So talking about freedom as a learned skill, it's really easy to say yes to everything because making money feels really good. And you start thinking about all the things you can do with that money. But when it starts to go against my core values and starts to take away from time on those things, then that's when I go, nah, this just isn't worth it. There isn't an amount of money you can throw at me that's going to be worth me missing vacation with my family. So, and some of my clients understood and they were excited for me that I was going on a 2-week vacation and they wouldn't hear from me. And then I guess some clients complained about it and couldn't believe that, a CPA would just disappear for 2 weeks and not call their clients back. And I said, well, that's unfortunate. They feel that way. They probably shouldn't be clients of mine if that's how they feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about you? What's the hot topic in Dr. Parker Houston's world?
Yeah, well, one of our mentors, Bud Lamb, our adults pastor, used to ask me a question all the time when we'd meet. He'd say, "What are you hearing from God right now?" And so I've taken over that practice. Well, I haven't met with him as frequently lately. And so I've taken over that practice by journaling about that question, writing that question down, and then writing out some things that come to mind. And so I would say that there's something happening with me that I feel like in my faith journey that I'm hearing from God right now about planning. Basically, I am a very planful, very intentional. I'm very passionate about intentional living, passionate about goal setting, passionate about stretching myself in kind of all areas of life. But I've realized that it leads me to this point of maybe having too much faith in my ability to control things, control outcomes, control the future, control my marriage, my kids, my relationships, achieve my goals. And what I'm experiencing right now over the last year for me has been very hard in a number of arenas. It's been hard in my health area. It's been hard in my marriage. It's been hard with parenting and balancing my household through COVID and some of the pressures that came from that. And what God is teaching me right now, what I hear him saying to me right now is, Parker, I don't want your faith to be in your ability to control the future because you don't have any ability to do that. I don't want your faith to be in your savings or your bank account or your job or your income because I've been through a lot of things that have felt pretty out of control. And what I hear God saying to me is that he is willing to, at some times, wrestle those things away from me so that he can have my faith and my heart and my confidence in him, not in my planning and my ability to kind of control the outcomes of things. So I don't know if that resonates with people, but it's kind of this paradox between being planful with your life and taking responsibility and being an intentional person, and yet realizing that while doing those things, it's not a guarantee that a certain outcome will come about. And so being planful while yet leaving the outcome open, or not being insistent, because I have a real history of being very, like, if something doesn't go a certain way, I'll persist and persist and persist until I get it. And that persistence is good, but life is often understood through paradox, right? And the Bible often teaches through paradox. So there's this paradox of being planful while being present today, like you talked a lot about being present. So I think what God's trying to teach me is to be fully present for my life today, because when I'm too stressed and worried about the future and what I want to make happen, I hate when I'm at the park with my kids and my brain is thinking about work or a goal or something that I wanted to happen and I'm stressing out about that. I hate that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my friends, I was talking to him about parenting the other day, and I admire him. He's a very good father. And he said that he's figuring out that mastering parenting or being a good father most of the time is just being present. And he said, we talk about, I want to do all these activities. I want to teach my kid this. I want to make sure that they, learn this before they leave the house. And he said, all those things are important, but it's just being present. So I love what you're talking about. Just, being aware of that. When you're going through this process and this is kind of hitting you, what's the uneasiness in hearing this?
It's probably just based on, I think Paul even writes in the New Testament, I don't know the verse off the top of my head since we're being so unscripted here, but it's, where does your suffering come from? Does it not come from your desires that are at war within you? And so I think it's about me wanting something. I want this to happen. I want that to happen. I want to be at this place in my life. And, there's some Harvard research that you can look up online. Robert Waldinger has a great TED Talk on it. And what they found in all their happiness research over like almost, 100 years is that perfectionism is the greatest killer of joy. And I thought I learned that 5 years ago. And what God has taken me back to school saying, dude, you're in kindergarten on this topic of being present and not being a perfectionist. So I think what I'm hearing is I need to experiment more. I need to let things be. I need to just so what I'm doing is I'm kind of going through this interesting experimental process of just like, even on my backpacking trip, I did not want the campsite that we were at. But I decided, you know what? To heck with it. The ground's uneven, spot doesn't look right. I think there's a better spot up there. I'm putting my tent down anyways. I know that sounds like a silly example, but for me, it was a mental and spiritual victory to
That's
just
awesome.
say, I'm just going to do this and see what happens. So I'm in a very experimental, kind of open-handed, part of season of my life right now. And I'm trying to relinquish some of the control and just be more present and more available.
So I caught you at a good time with suggesting this format for today's podcast.
You did, yeah. And I have to say I've enjoyed it. So hopefully people have gotten something out of hearing about what our kind of existential, emotional, spiritual, learning points are at this point in our life journey right now. So that's what I'm learning. It's an ongoing life lesson, but I realize I have a choice to resist it. I could keep trying to plan and insist on my goals, but what I'm hearing is just let go of a bit of control and just relax.
Yeah, I want to ask you, and this might be too personal to share on the podcast, but feel free to share whatever details you want. One of our most popular episodes was when we talked about your healing from neck pain, your healing of over a decade in pain with TMS symptoms. Now that you're going through this, learning this, letting go piece, do you feel like that is going to help with your continued healing in that area?
Wow. You don't even know I'm reading this book right now called The Great Pain Deception by Steve. And I actually I'm meeting with him on Monday, 2 days from now, and to get his thoughts on my journey and just talk with him. So I'm excited to do that. Absolutely 100%. So you're right on the money with your instincts there. There's something about my need to control and perfect and achieve my goals that generates a massive amount of tension. And I'll share very personally that I've been struggling with chronic fatigue over the last year, which is so weird because people that know that I backpack and mountain bike, like never in a million years would people think that I struggle with fatigue unless I shared it with a close personal friend. And I used to think it like wasn't a thing, that it was like made up. And I fully believe that it's somehow related to this exhausting myself mentally over trying too hard in several areas of my life. So I don't have all the answers yet, but I have some breadcrumbs and some clues. And so I'm just exploring this, and I'm getting a lot of coaching from God and through my faith and through Christ. So I'm thankful that I'm exploring that.
That's great. I think that's why that episode was so popular, because we have a lot of high achieving people that listen in, that are always constantly trying to grow and strive and make things better in their world and achieve goals. And I think that episode resonated with people. And I think what you're talking about now will also.
Yeah. And this book I'm reading, it basically says that these mind-body symptoms that we get that are so common to people, they're so common. I mean, they're just absolutely everywhere. It's a signal that's trying to tell us something. And we have a choice whether we listen or just keep doing what we've been doing because we're insistent on it. And so I'm trying to stop and listen, but I would say it's very hard for me, and I'm a slow learner and I'm very resistant, and it takes a lot of pain apparently to get and a lot of symptoms to get my attention.
That's probably why you and I are friends, because I learned that lesson during tax season. I think I shared that with you, but I might have even shared it on the podcast, but my attention stuff tends to resonate in my stomach when I will not pay attention to any of the other warning signs.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, when you, not to be too graphic, but when you cannot get off the toilet, you cannot go to work. So that is your body's way of telling you, like, you need to pay attention, dude. Like, you're running through all the warning signs. You're okay, fine. I'm just going to attach you to the toilet and you're going to pay attention.
That's actually not true, because I sent you a picture of that office chair that I told you I'd buy for you. That's got the built-in toilet in the office chair with the laptop and the fax machine and the cell phone and everything connected to it. So you just can do both.
Thanks for being a good friend. I appreciate you looking out for me. That's one way to continue to run through the warning signs. Yeah, perfect.
But actually, we buy devices so that we can ignore, in a real sense, we buy devices and ergonomic things so that we can ignore what our body is trying to tell us, the message.
The stress headaches, we take ibuprofen, all that stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, good, man. That sounds like a good lesson that all of us can be paying attention to.
I think that's a wrap.
Yeah, I think we'll wrap it up with that. Yeah. So if you guys enjoyed this, we'd love to hear about it. This is our first version of the Campfire. We may bring this back depending on the response we get from people that tune in. And if you've enjoyed this show or any of the other episodes, we ask that you subscribe and share it with a friend, and maybe even take a few seconds to give us a review on your favorite platform, whether it's Apple, Google, or Spotify, or any of the others. So until next week, keep climbing your next peak.